lot for this opportunity. It's an honor for us to be here. This will be like a presentation in partnership, and I will do the first part, and Zora will do the second part. In the next few minutes, we will share, both of us will share with you our experiences and personal stories about how research changed our lives and how research led us to become activists. And maybe this will be useful for you also to think about ways that you can use research for yourself to become activists or to inspire others to become active citizens. So I started out my life as a researcher out of a pure academic interest in the notions of cleanliness and purity. My favorite cultural anthropologist is Mary Douglas, who wrote the most amazing book in the world, I think, about how purity is used by society to exclude or include people. But during my studies here in Budapest, I also heard of applied anthropology, and I didn't know what it meant, but it sounded really useful, or it sounded really important, so I thought that maybe I should do something with it. For months, my co-researcher and I, we had been looking for a topic. This is back in the beginning of the 2000s, of the years 2000. So we had been looking for a topic that would meet these two criteria, something that has to do with cleanliness and something that can be useful for society. And then in 2002, this short article, this long, in a newspaper that doesn't exist anymore in Hungary, was published about a new project launched by the mayor of Budapest, which was about cleaning the underground pedestrian passages of Budapest of three things: illegal vendors, graffiti, and homeless people. And so we thought that, okay, so this will be the topic of our research. And then for 3 years, we actually did research about this particular program of the mayor of Budapest and what it meant that the public spaces of Budapest had to be cleaned of homeless people. Over these 3 years, I got more and more angry as I discovered through the interviews and the texts that we read that basically what was happening was that the management or the leadership of Budapest was trying to convince me that they were doing this cleaning of the city of poor or homeless people in my name because I was the decent resident and this is what I wanted, and I wanted to see a clean city, and homeless people didn't belong to this clean city. So it turned out that these people were chased away in my name. This project was supposed to serve my imagined needs as a white middle-class resident of the city. I do come from a safe middle-class background, which comes from many privileges. One of them is that I have a safe home, and I've always had a safe home. And the other is that I have almost unlimited access to quality education, either in Hungary or abroad. And I was vaguely aware of these as I was studying anthropology, but this research really forced me to take a hard look at my own position in the world and the things that I took for granted. And it was definitely a process of awakening for me to actually see myself in the mirror. And more importantly, because awakening is nice, but what do we do with it? This research also did something that I never knew was missing from my life. It actually helped me discover my political self. So it not only made me angry as an individual for being used basically by politicians to exclude people, but it also made me think about who was responsible for reproducing these injustices and what was my responsibility to do something about it. After we completed this research, we started thinking about how to make it useful for society, and this is what we read in the applied anthropology text, that we have to make it useful. So we contacted different NGOs and civil society organizations, we sent them our research, and I will stress this word, we were really hoping that it would be used by someone, somehow. One of these organizations that we contacted was called Men on the Street, which was an activist network at that time fighting for the right to housing. And this email that I sent to them also changed my life again for good, because what happened is that this organization didn't just say thank you for the study, this is very interesting, but they actually invited us to join them. And they basically said that if you want to really do something about this, you actually have to do it. You can't expect other people to do it for you. You can't just hope that your academic work will be read by civil society organizations and somebody will do something about it, but you actually have to take action to make this happen. you have to actively engage with civil society if you really want your work to be used. And in my experience, NGOs and social movements don't really come to academics or researchers for advice. You actually have to go ahead and make sure that the knowledge you produce is available to them and they know that they can use it and that you actually take an active part in using it. And this was the part of applied anthropology that they didn't teach me at the university. I hope they had, but at least now I have this story to share with you. So in the end, I did join this group, Man on the Street, in 2005. And for the first few months, I was telling myself that I was doing this out of a sense of duty, that this is what good applied anthropologists do. They follow through with their research. I wanted to make sure that the group understands our findings and why criminalization and exclusion from public space happens. And then another important thing happened. In 2005, the Budapest General Assembly proposed a law that would have banned begging, panhandling, in all of the public spaces of Budapest. And actually this form of socio-spatial exclusion was a really important part of our research, that banning begging means basically the criminalization of poverty and homelessness, and this is one way to get rid of poor people from cities. The group didn't really understand at first why this has to do with the right to housing, but then we had a lot of conversations about it, and I brought them historical and international examples of how the criminalization of begging leads to further criminalization of poverty. And then it did some convincing, but then we decided to organize against this proposed local law. And one day I found myself as the organizer of this protest in front of the City Hall of Budapest. And to my surprise, and this hasn't happened a lot since then, but we actually won. And the City Hall didn't vote on this ban, they rejected it, which was amazing for me. And I have this very vivid memory of traveling on the tram, the 4-6 tram, that probably you will also take a lot of times while you are here, that I was thinking back about the protest the previous day, and then I had suddenly this sense of power coming over me, and I never felt this before, and I know that it sounds a little bit cheesy, but I think that on that tram, at that moment, I was actually born as a citizen, and I was 25 years old at that time, so I lived 25 years of my life just as a skeleton of a citizen, but then I actually realized that what I was feeling, that I actually can intervene into what's happening, that there was this research that I did that concluded that if you criminalize begging, you will further push poor people to the margins, and then I joined this group, and then we decided to organize against it, and then they actually rejected it, and there is no ban like that in Budapest. So for me, it's a very important moment, and it was a very liberating moment. And since that moment, I have been an activist for housing rights. In 2009, I co-founded the Cities for All, which is the only grassroots housing advocacy organization right now in Hungary. And one of the very unique features of this organization is that it has both homeless, formerly homeless, and middle-class members who are committed, who are dedicated to the issue of housing. And for 9 years now with this group, we have been working together for the right to housing in Hungary, and we have been learning from each other, and we have been teaching each other, and it has been the most important experience of my life. So this process made me realize that through research I found my citizenship, and that hope was not enough. I actually had to take action. And then I started thinking about this, and I realized if research was something that politicized me, somebody who was really highly educated, living comfortably, I had no need to be changed in a way because life was good for me, then maybe research can be something that has the same effect on other people, and it can liberate and politicize other people. And especially it can be useful for those who suffer from the most serious forms of oppression or exclusion. And these are the people who are usually not present in traditional university settings, or if they are present, they are the objects of research, and we talk a lot about them, but nothing really happens to them. A lot happens to us. We get PhDs and we get nice jobs, but nothing really happens to their citizenship and their political consciousness. So as I was struggling with these issues, I was very lucky to discover the world of participatory action research, which is an approach of research where people who experience some kind of social problems or issues or situations are the researchers themselves. So they are not being studied by other people, but they actually become researchers, and they study the problems that affect them and then try to come up with solutions to these problems. And I thought that this was this was a really good, participatory action research was what I was looking for. It's a combination of research and political consciousness. And it's a long process, so it gives people time to actually go through this process. So today I work in the School of Public Life, which is a community-based education center. And in this school, we believe that democracy is not a noun, but a verb. It only happens if we do it. Democracy can't exist in the abstract. It's only through action that we actually do democracy. So we offer a lot of courses and workshops and open forums where people in Hungary can learn skills to advocate for themselves, to represent themselves, to stand up for their rights. And we help individuals, but we also have social movements and civil society organizations and NGOs, and we basically want to bring them closer to politics in the very broad sense of the word. We want them to be engaged in public life. We want them to be active and to step up for themselves. And many of our students in this school come from socially disadvantaged backgrounds, but we also have middle-class students who are interested, and this social mixing is actually really important, just as it is in the Cities for All, where I'm also an activist. And in the school, we see participatory action research as a form of critical pedagogy. PAR, or participatory action research, is a long-term form of political education, I think, where people explore the conditions around them, they connect the dots, they draw conclusions, and then they think about ways to take action. So in this process, they go through the same things that I did back in 2005. They actually, through research, become citizens who understand what's going on around them and what's happening to them and what's their role in everything that's happening. And it's very important that in our participatory action projects, most of the people who participate have no academic background. Some of them don't even have high school education. So this is the kind of research that everybody can do, and they are exercising their right to research, basically, without having any kind of official recognition about it. And some of the participatory action research that I have been involved in included homeless people who live in the public spaces of Budapest, who wanted to study the forms of state discrimination against them. We also did research with people who live in housing poverty, about the history of housing movements in Budapest. And I also did research, and Zora will talk more about it, about the access of people with disabilities to independent living. So as you can see, most of the PAR projects that I have been involved in have to do with something with housing, because this is what is important to me, but these projects could be anything that is important to anyone. And the important thing is that I learned a lot in these projects, and not only from the findings or from the actual data that we collected, but from my co-researchers. And I think these processes are co-learning processes where we teach each other. So just to kind of round this up, I don't believe in individual research anymore. I only believe in collective participatory research, where knowledge is not produced for the sake of academic ideals or professional career building, but is shared broadly and is a means to empowering people to become fully fledged citizens and political beings in the world. So I believe in research that produces citizens who take responsibility for change, and I believe that universities and research centers should play a central role in promoting and embracing this kind of research. Of course, I don't believe that everyone has to be an activist or that everyone has to do participatory action research. I believe other forms of research are valuable too. But I believe that we have to take responsibility for change. We can't just observe what's happening. We actually have to change it. And I believe that universities and other academic spaces have to be places where these questions are not only addressed as abstract topics or even worse as niceties, but as key political questions that everyone has to find their own answers to. And I believe that in a world where masses of people are deemed or stigmatized politically, economically, and socially useless, which is a trend, it's a recent trend not only in our country but in other countries too, universities and the intellectuals that it socializes have to take a leading role in helping all of us discover the real meaning of our citizenship, and that these spaces have to play a leading role in challenging the political, social, and economic conditions that dehumanize all of us. So I think the role of research is to help all of us find our humanity, but very important, our political humanity, and not only our physical and biological humanity. So thank you very much, and now we will have a question for you.
giving me the opportunity to share my experiences about our participatory action research and how it changed my life. So my experience with difficulties related to housing goes back to the time when I started university in 2009. First I moved to Pécs and spent the next 3 years there in the dormitory. But when I finished my bachelor degree there, I decided to come to Budapest and continue my studies here. Initially, I thought it would be an easy process to manage because I already had done it in a smaller town a few years ago. First of all, I contacted each universities which offer postgraduate programs in psychology because I was studying psychology in Pécs as well, to find out if they are wheelchair accessible or not. And finally, I ended up scheduling a meeting with the coordinator of the student with special needs of the Budapest University, and also to visit the dormitory where I could live if I would study here. A few months later, it turned out that due to fire safety regulations, it's not possible to create a wheelchair accessible room in the dormitory as we agreed earlier. The university offered then 2 options to me. The first was to move to the institution for people with physical disabilities at Martibányi Square here in Budapest and live there for 2 years when my graduate program lasts. And the second one was to postpone my studies with 1 year and stay at home and see what the future brings. I have never lived in an institution before, and I knew that as long as I have some influence on my own life, I will never do so. And staying at home wasn't a real option for me either, because I'm coming from a small village with bad accessibility conditions and with basically new opportunities for leading a really independent life. Me and my family started to look for backup options as the academic year had begun in September, and in the midsummer of 2012, I was still in need of finding a place here in Budapest. Although we left no stone unturned, it appeared to be impossible to find a place to stay for a student in a wheelchair. Those universities which had proper rooms were insisted on keeping them for their own students, and not to mention sublets, which basically still don't have proper options, those who have some special needs related to accessibility. Finally, I managed to move into a social housing unit and to start my studies on time, but it was a matter of fortune rather than a systematic response to my problem. For this point on, I knew that I want to do something about this situation. I thought it simply cannot be allowed that students, young talented students with physical disabilities are excluded from the highest quality higher education institutions just because they are not able to offer proper accommodation for them. It simply cannot be allowed that young people with physical disabilities are prevented from becoming independent from their families and starting their own lives. I had no doubt that this is a nonsense, but at that time I had no idea how to change it. Joining the participatory action research, living independently in a community group was a life-changing experience for me. Although I had no idea about the concept of participatory action research when I went to the COF training in August 2016, it became clear slowly that this could be the way of change which I had been looking for so long. Our group was made up of 14 members, 10 people with physical disabilities who were directly affected by those problems, and 3 ALEs who were social scientists and social professionals, and we also had 1 photographer among the ALEs. We got to know each other during the introductory training and also got familiar with the main types of the research methods. Afterward, we started to work on defining our big question, which we have tried to answer in the upcoming 10 months. Following several weeks of brainstorming in Common, we decided to dedicate our research to the question, what are the conditions for people with disabilities to live independently in Hungary. Considering that this is an extraordinarily complex topic, we decided to narrow it down to 5 main areas, which were the following: housing policy, accessible public transportation and built environment, income supporting services, and we also paid attention to the social attitude towards people with physical disability. We used a wide range of research methods to explore these areas. We designed and conducted 2 online surveys, one for people with physical disabilities and one for care workers. We were interviewing people with physical disabilities, focusing on their housing circumstances, and also professionals. At last but not least, we also used public data several times. Although our topic was very complex, we had been paying special attention to 2 topics during the entire process. The public transportation was our first focus area. We organized 2 roundtable discussions on the problems and possible solutions to the public transportation in Budapest. We examined this topic from the point of accessibility, of course. On the other hand, we also put a big emphasis on dealing with housing policies. We also had some guest speakers during the research process, one of whom was a lawyer specialized in the so-called supported housing. This form of housing is supposed to replace the large institutions which have to be closed down in line with the EU regulations. It became clear for us quite soon that the current system serves the interests of those who maintain these mini institutions rather than offering a real opportunity for independent living for those in need. Thanks to our research, we've gained a huge amount of lexical knowledge, but I think it's more important that we become much more confident, got interested in public life, and the political awareness has started to develop as well. I do believe that this set of skills made us self-advocates who are not only determined to achieve social changes, but also conscious on what they want to achieve. In last spring, we already knew that we would like to continue work together when the research periods come to its end. At that time, we came across the open call of the Civil College Foundation, which was targeted at local communities with some experience in advocacy. We thought it was an amazing opportunity to increase the size of our group and prove its subsistence on the long run. So we applied, and after completing all the requirements successfully, we won enough money to employ a community organizer who can dedicate her time, full time, to coordinate our group, and also receive mentorship and professional training in the frame of the program. We opened up our group to the newcomers in last October, and since then we have been functioning as the first ever advocacy group in Hungary, focusing on the housing, independent housing of people with physical disabilities. Our goal is to introduce a legal reform in the field of supported housing by making the system more responsive to the demands and individual needs of those who are affected. Besides fulfilling a pivotal role in housing advocacy for people with physical disabilities, we have been continuing our activities concerning the accessible public transportation. The issue of the reconstruction of Metro Line 3, which is one of the busiest public transportation lines here in Budapest, served us like a hot topic last year, especially after the mayor of Budapest, István Tarlós, made a statement saying that it basically makes no sense to invest money in making the metro line accessible because people with physical disabilities don't use it anymore. Apparently, of thinking unacceptable and wanted to raise our voice to show the nonsense and the reverse logic behind this approach. We organized 2 street actions at the Dózsa-György úti metro station, which is the only station which was supposed to be eliminated from the process of making the metro accessible in the first phase of the reconstruction. We held our first event at the end of October last year. We took some wheelchairs to the underpass and asked the passers-by to sit in and try to use the ramp. It turned out very soon that the slope is way too steep to overcome it on their own, so they need some help. They could also attempt to overcome the stairs with the help of some funny tools, for example balloons. Our second actions took place on the 3rd of November, which was also the day of the closure of the northern phase of the metro line. In the meantime, we were attending several meetings with very good actors involved in the issue, among others the Metro Project Directorate, the National Federation of Disabled Persons Association, and the Association of Disabled Persons in Budapest. In spite of the demonstrations organized by various actors and the increasing media attention, neither the Mayor of Budapest nor the government wanted to take the financial responsibility for the costs related to accessibility. In December 2017, an opposition party politician submitted a referendum question on the full accessibility of the metro line. The collection of the signatures would be started finally at the beginning of February. A few days later, the president of the National Federation of Disabled Persons Association suddenly managed to make significant progress with the decision makers, and after a series of negotiations with István Tarlós, they signed the agreement. They agreed on examining station by station what are the technical possibilities to make all the stations accessible, and finally, at the end of April, they signed the agreement on making all the stations accessible by the end of 2023. This decision has been the greatest success story of the Hungarian civil society for a very long time. Our group is proud of its contribution to this great achievement, and it also inspires us to continue our struggles in other fields as well. Thank you for your attention.
So thank you very much. And now we have a bit of a time for Q&A. So if you have a question, we've got people with the mics at the two ends, and if you're raising your hands, they are quickly going to give you the mic. So fundamentally, we saw that this Q&A question refers to this final part of the plenary scope. And so Tessa and Zora, yes. There is a question over here.
So the first speaker mentioned, I think an anthropologist talking about purity. Would you please tell me, Mary, what was the last name?
Mary Douglas.
Douglas, thank you.
Purity and Danger, that's the title of her book. So the reconstruction, the fight for the reconstruction of Metro Line number 3 ultimately comes from Mary Douglas, the anthropologist Mary Douglas, if we continue this generation from generation struggle.
So you might be impressed as well. I got chills, and this time not because of the temperature, but the stories. But we've got questions over there too.
Question to Zora. Did you feel that making so many pictures of all the situations helped in approaching the media as well, and by handing them all the pictures you made yourself?
Sure, it always helps. I think if we can send some pictures to the media, But what we rather needed, I think, to organize actions regularly to show them that it's a hot topic and they have to deal with it continuously. But pictures help a lot as well.
And there was a question behind you, yeah.
Yeah, in both cases you talked about changing the law and policy, you're actually trying to do action, and both of you spoke to that. In Canada, we have I'm more interested in this movement in the role of law schools and law students to actually enable a lot of the stuff we're talking about. So in your cases, is it been a factor? I mean, I'm totally impressed as a business school putting on this conference, which is another great thing. But what about law? Because I mean, you have to change the policy through action. But have you had support from law students, or is your university or are people well versed in policy action?
And I'm not sure that this end of the room could hear the question. So
Yes, so first I will answer, and I think Zora will also have something to say about this. So the question was whether there are lawyers among us, or we understand law as we work a lot with policy change and achieving systemic change. Yes, actually. So in the Cities for All, which is this grassroots housing advocacy group, we basically gave birth to our sister organization, which is called Street Lawyer, and now there are, for example, 12 volunteer lawyers who work only on housing rights in Hungary, which is very, very unique. So everything that we do is a combination of political advocacy with legal advocacy, and we think that you have to do the two things together. It's very nice to raise awareness and change people's attitudes, but you actually have to achieve change at the legal level, because that's what applies to everyone, and laws have a binding effect. So if it's something is obligatory by law, it actually has to happen.
Yeah, we with the Living Independently in the Community Group also work together with the State Lawyer Association, and now we also have a volunteer lawyer who helps us specifically with disability-related issues, especially with this legal change we would like to introduce related to the supported housing. We have a volunteer lawyer dedicated to that. So we definitely need this professional support.
Thank you. Question over there. Yes, let's use the microphone because I guess the room is.
So to both of you, Zora, I think Tessa, you talked a little bit about it, and Zora, you mentioned that you guys got some kind of grant that allowed you to move forward. But what is the need for funding, and where does it come from in a Hungarian context for this type of work? And if you could talk a little bit to that.
Interesting question. So in my experience in Hungary, there is no funding for participatory action research as far as the way in which we understand participatory action research, or we haven't been able to find financial sources for doing this kind of research. So we find kind of alternative sources. Like private donations, and Rika mentioned my being elected as an Ashoka Fellow, and so we use part of my fellowship to support, for example, this particular research. So I personally don't see any institutional structures to support this kind of very grassroots, kind of radical form of research, but I would be happy to hear if you know of any. And you can always support our organization if you go to our website.
I guess we've got time for a last question if there is one more. Over there, and let's use the mic. If you can pass the mic here in the parking way, that would be great. Thank you. Because the other end of the room doesn't hear.
I guess this is going to be for both of you. Thanks. I guess this is going to be for both of you. I was really curious, Tessa, about your discussion of citizenship and your own personal awakening, and considering kind of the global context of migration as an issue. I think of citizenship usually as a legal concept, but you really talked about it as a very human experience of coming into yourself and your being. So I was just wondering if you could talk about kind of how you think about this concept of citizenship and its relationship to humanity.
Yeah, I don't like the word citizenship because it implies this being member of a nation state that has like legal boundaries and things like that. But so that's why I sometimes use political self or political creature or something like political humanity or something like that. I believe that citizenship is this idea. If we don't define it in terms of the nation state, then it's this idea of us understanding how we are connected to society and political processes. And I think it also involves not only understanding it, but also understanding what our responsibilities are and in what ways we can change it, or to think about if we want to change it and how we can change it. And for me, citizenship, it means that we are interested in public life or politics because we think that it has a really important impact on us and not something that is far away or alien. And in Hungary, this idea of politics being something nasty and outside of us and something that other people do, I think it's a very negative process, and politics is being colonized by people who are a very small elite, and I think we have to reclaim politics for ourselves. Politics as a sphere of everyday interactions and everyday life and decisions about us. Zora, do you want to say something about politics or citizenship?
Yeah, I think what I can add, I definitely think that in my case, as I mentioned, I had the feeling that I need to do some change related to the whole system, which is not able to provide proper housing for people with physical disabilities, but only as a part of or a positive consequence of this participative action research. And became clear for me that it won't happen without being engaged in politics to some extent at least. And I need to take, not only me but also the other researchers need to take that kind of responsibility as well in order to achieve real changes.
And I think it's an important footnote that Zora mentioned, that we got this grant to employ one person as a kind of community organizer in our group, and it's Zora. So she has actually become like a professional community organizer who understands a lot of the ways in which society and politics are organized.
Thank you very much. This was the last question. So I have to say that.